1.
I'm going to start with the bony landmarks of the shoulder girdle. I'm going to start with the inferior angle of the scapula. Put your arm behind you. Thank you. So down here at the bottom of the scapula, where it sticks out, that's the inferior angle. Trace it to the top. The top, like bump, is the superior angle. And then the line between the two, this ridge, is the vertebral border of the scapula. The axillary border, you can put your arm down. You start at the inferior angle and feel the bottom and go up towards under the arm is the axillary border. The acromion, turn toward the front. Follow the clavicle to the top of the shoulder, and that's the acromion. It's a little bump right there. And the spine of the scapula, I'm going to start back down at the inferior angle just so I can trace it back up to the, can you put your arm behind you again? Thank you. To the superior angle of the scapula, and then follow it across. The top is the spine of the scapula. That was shoulder girdle. The shoulder, I'm going to do the greater tubercle, and I can find it best by going to the acromion and then coming down just a little bit towards the posterior is the greater tubercle of the humerus, and the lesser tubercle is more toward the front. The deltoid tuberosity, go down the humerus, and there's a little knot, the deltoid tuberosity. Okay, the muscle identifications. I'm going to start with the upper traps, the upper trapezius. The origin is up at the occipital protuberance, and the insertion is the outer third of the clavicle at the acromion process that we found earlier. And one of the actions for the upper traps is a prime mover in scapular elevation. So move your wheel up. That's scapular elevation. Lower traps, it's going to originate from the spinous processes, like at the middle and lower thoracic vertebrae, and go, that's the origin. The insertion is at the base of the spine of the scapula. So they go this way. And the lower traps is a prime mover in scapular depression. So up and then back down. Depression. Okay, and rhomboids, kind of in between the upper traps and lower traps. It's going to originate from the spinous processes of C7, right up here, to T5. So C7 to T5. And go to the vertebral border of the scapula. So here's the vertebral border of the scapula. So right in there is the rhomboids. And the rhomboids, the action is scapular retraction. So can you move your arms back? Like that scapular retraction. And serratus anterior, toward the front for me. Move your arm up. They're on the ribs, the surface of the top 8 ribs, first 8 ribs. And that's the origin. The insertion is the vertebral border of the scapula all the way back here again. And this is an action for the serratus anterior is scapular protraction. So move your shoulders forward. And that's the serratus anterior. Okay. So that was shoulder girdle. For the shoulder, we'll do anterior deltoid. And the origin is the latter third of the clavicle. And it's going to go to the deltoid tuberosity. So it's like the front of the arm. And the middle deltoid starts with the acromion process. The origin is the acromion process. The insertion is the deltoid tuberosity again. And I forgot with anterior deltoid, the action for the anterior deltoid, this front, is shoulder abduction and also shoulder flexion. Okay. And then back to middle deltoid, starting at the acromion process to the deltoid tuberosity, and it's shoulder abduction, the action, one of the actions. And for posterior deltoid, it's going to originate at the spine of the scapula and go down to the deltoid, insert at the deltoid tuberosity. And the posterior deltoid, the action is shoulder abduction again, and also shoulder extension. Let's move your arms back. Shoulder extension. Okay. Next one is supraspinatus, which is one of the rotator cuff muscles. And the supraspinatus is going to start at the supraspinous fossa of the scapula. So if you find the spine of the scapula, supraspinous is going to be above it. So supraspinatus is going to be above the spine of the scapula. And it's going to insert at the greater tubercle. So up in here is the supraspinatus. And one of the actions of the supraspinatus is again shoulder abduction, abduction. The infraspinatus, another one of the rotator cuff muscles, infraspinatus, is from the infraspinous fossa of the scapula. So the spine of the scapula, go under the spine of the scapula, and it's also going to the greater tubercle. And the infraspinatus, one of the actions is shoulder external rotation. So move, can you make like flex? There you go. So external rotation, the shoulder. And teres minor is from the axillary border of the scapula. From the axillary border, that's the origin. And it's also going to insert on the greater tubercle. This way. And also, this is for shoulder external rotation. Again, so you can, this way. Shoulder external rotation. And subscapularis, that's where I think it'll work better from the front. Okay, so gotta go kind of deep for subscapularis. It's also a rotator cuff muscle, and it's going from the subscapular fossa, so underneath the scapula, and it's going to insert on the lesser tubercle. And subscapularis is for shoulder internal rotation. Shoulder internal rotation, and that's subscapularis. Okay. Latissimus dorsi. It originates from the spinous processes of T7 through L5. So from, can you turn towards the camera a little bit? Right in here. And it's on the spinous processes of the spine again. And they're going to insert on the bicipital groove of the humerus. So it's going to go up to the humerus. And this is for shoulder extension. And that's it.